We just got a new white card that says a deck can contain any number of these cards. This is going to be a lot of fun. Templar Knight looks really cool. It's like a white Shadowborn Apostle, but it triggers a little differently. You need to be attacking with 5 of them and then tap the 5 and pay 1 white mana to be able to go and fetch the legendary artifact from your deck. There's a lot of really good stuff you can do with Templar Knight. And I'm sure that this is going to be one of, if not the most popular card from Assassin's Creed. I'm definitely going to be trying to build something because I got a lot of ideas when I was coming up with this video. We're going to start off by talking about the different commanders that you can use as the Templar Knight commander. There's a ton of really good options. After that, we're going to talk about some synergy cards. But the commander is the most important thing to pick, so let's start off with that. First off, you have the mono white options. The cards I wanted to mention include Apothecary White. It can create a lot of food tokens for you, which you can then use to create a lot of creature tokens. Boromir. You can protect your board, which is really nice. You're going to need to have 5 Templar Knights attacking to be able to get the trigger. So if a board wipe hits, you're screwed. Boromir can help protect that. The Templar Knights are humans, so Rick seems disgusting, either in the deck or as the commander. You have to be attacking with the Templar Knights, so Odric seems like a cool addition. Being able to control how creatures block so that we can keep your knights alive. Paladin Dance works in a similar way to Boromir. Skrelv, 1 mana so you can actually play it before Templar Knights start coming in, and you can use it to protect your Templar Knights, which is nice. Tashar, you're going to be running a lot of historic spells in this deck, being legendary or artifacts or legendary artifacts, so Tashar can help get the Templar Knights that die back from your graveyard. And lastly, Thalia, Heretic Cathar. You're going to need to attack with these Templar Knights, so if your opponent's creatures enter tapped, it'll be easier to get a clean attack off. Moving on from the mono white options, let's talk about the Azorius options. A lot of really good options here as well. Brago could be pretty sweet to protect them. You attack with all 5 Templar Knights in Brago, you trigger the Templar Knight to activate, and then you exile them all with Brago and return them to the battlefield so that way you don't have to worry about them dying to combat. Denry seems pretty decent. You can have Denry enter with a first strike counter on it or a +1/+1 counter on it. And then if you have any other ways to get counter on Denry, you get them on there. And then every Templar Knight that you play afterwards will have those counters. So having first strike as a 3/1 can be a lot safer and help with your attacks. Goldbug, Humanity's Ally, having Assassin's Creed Transformers crossover going on. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to attacking humans you control. Don't even have to worry about your Templar Knights attacking. This is just a good way to protect your board. Plus the backside can make it so your Templar Knights can't be countered, along with a little card draw engine. Grand Arbiter Augustin. Everybody hates this card, but it makes your Templar Knights cost 1 mana and it slows down your opponents. Hatham Kenway, protection from assassins, who cares? Other knights you control get +2/+2, very nice. And protection from assassins, probably not going to ever matter. When it enters the battlefield, for each opponent, exile up to 1 target creature that player controls until it leaves the battlefield. So it acts as a way to remove blockers while giving your Templar Knights +2/+2. There's Linvala for the same reasons as Boromir or Paladin Dance. And Sten. Make it so your creatures cost 1 less to cast, so your Templar Knights are only 1 mana. Now we have a few Selesnya cards to talk about. A lot of these are going to be very solid commanders, and there's a decent trend towards humans matter inside Selesnya, so we'll be talking about a few where that's the case. For example, Catilda. Human creatures you control have tap, add 1 mana of any of these creatures' colors. Seems pretty decent. Turn your vigilant creatures into mana dorks. I like that. Plus you can get a lot of counters on things to help buff up those Templar Knights. Similarly, you have Kyler. Whenever another human enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on Kyler, and other humans you control get +1/+1 for each counter on Kyler. The bigger you make Kyler, the bigger are your Templar Knights, and every Templar Knight you play, the bigger Kyler gets. Seems like a great include. Miri, Weatherlight Duelist. Similar to Odric, you're kind of controlling the way your opponents can block. Samwise Gamgee. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield, like a Templar Knight, you create a food, and you can sack 3 foods to return target historic card from your graveyard to hand. That includes all of those legendary artifacts that you can fetch using the Templar Knights. And the last Selesnya commander I wanted to mention is Sigarda, Font of Blessings. You may look at the top card of your library at any time, and you may cast human and angel spells from the top of your library. So those Templar Knights on the top of your library, you can just plop them into play. and also it gives your other permanents hexproof. Seems disgusting. Now on to Orzhov. You've got a bunch of other creatures here that work well with Templar Knights. Some of them, again, because humans matter. We got a Knights Matter card in here as well, and then one other card. The Knights Matters card is Ariel, Knight of Windgrace. It can poop out Knight tokens. It has Vigilance, which is kind of on theme. And you can pay a black and tap X untapped Knights you control to destroy target creature with power X or less. Since the Templar Knights all have Vigilance, you can attack and then tap them to Ariel's ability to kind of pick out the blocker that you need to remove if that's the case. Or you can attack and then during your opponent's end step, you can tap Ariel to blow something up. Brina seems pretty good. This deck requires attacking a lot, so bolstering up your creatures whenever you attack and drawing cards seems pretty good. General Kudro, give your Templar Knights +1/+1, and it's good graveyard hate, while also being a good removal piece. Next we have Jarina, Dauntless General. Similar to some other cards I mentioned, you can sack Jarina. Humans you control get hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Just good board wipe protection. And in a similar vein, but very different, we lastly have Lurrus. Lurrus seems great. You can replay your Templar Knights from the graveyard using Lurrus, which is pretty nice. The last 2-color pairing I wanted to mention is Boros. We have a lot of good Boros commanders because Templar Knights like attacking, so it makes sense. Let's get into these. We're starting off with a Nim Pakal. Whenever you attack with one or more non-gnome creatures, put a +1/+1 counter on a Nim, then create X gnomes. So it's just a good way to pump out a big board via attacking with your Templar Knights. Aurelia, the Law Above. It's a good card draw engine, and it can turn into some lightning helixes, which is pretty cool. Aurelia, the War Leader. This is one of the more interesting options, I think, and I have a whole nother category coming later that's very on theme with what Aurelia does. Whenever Aurelia attacks, for the first time each turn, untap all creatures you control after this phase as an additional combat phase. So what you can do with Aurelia is attack with 5 Templar Knights in Aurelia. Aurelia will trigger. In response to the Aurelia trigger, you activate the Templar Knights to go and get a legendary artifact from your deck and put into play. And then Aurelia untaps all your Templar Knights, and then you can do it again. So it gives you an additional activation, along with an additional combat to get more damage done. That seems awesome. Gerard, Weatherlight Hero, more board wipe protection. Hoffrey, same thing, more board wipe protection, but it also turns them into spirits when they die, which is actually pretty interesting because it gives them +1/+1 trample and haste. Most importantly is the haste. So if you lose some of your Templar Knights, you get new ones with haste, and so those can attack right away if you need to. And the last Boros card is Iroas. Again, creatures you control have menace and prevent all damage that would be dealt to attacking creatures you control. A lot of the cards I'm talking about are ways to kind of keep your Templar Knights alive, which is really, really important because you need 5 of them to attack to get the trigger. So ways to make it so they don't die are very, very good. On to the 3-color pairings. Starting off with Esper, I got 2 cards I want to talk about here. There's Rafine. Rafine likes it when you attack with a lot of creatures. You can connive a lot, so that seems like a pretty good idea. And Sadar Jabari of Zalfir. This is an awesome commander for this deck. Whenever you attack with 1 or more knights, if it's in the command zone or on the battlefield, draw a card, then discard a card. You're going to be doing that a lot. And Flying First Strike. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, return target knight card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Sadar just returns all your dead knights back into play whenever it's attacking. And also you draw and discard every time you attack with a knight, whether or not it's in play. Awesome commander for the Templar Knights. One of the better options for sure. Next, we're going to talk about 3 Naya options. Aragorn Hornburg Hero. Attacking creatures you control have First Strike and Renown. The First Strike is huge, making it so creatures with toughness 1, 2, or 3 can't kill your Templar Knights, and also the Renown to make them bigger later. And then whenever a renowned creature you control deals combat damage to a player, double the number of counters on it. It can grow your Templar Knights pretty big, while also making it harder for your opponents to block them. There's Jetmir, Nexus of Revels. This just seems like a great card to just plop in the command zone. If you plan on attacking with 5 Templar Knights and you play Jetmir and that's all the creatures you have in play, your Templar Knights are now 5/5s with Trample, and they already had Vigilance, but Vigilance. So that's like a lot of damage. And then you got a couple more creatures in play. They're 6 power with Double Strike and Trample. Disgusting. Jetmir can be very potent as the commander of this deck. And lastly, Samut. Mostly because Samut can give other creatures you control haste, and that's pretty nice if you're trying to, out of nowhere, Templar Knight attack and activate. Also, you can untap another target creature, so if it comes down to it and you have 9 Templar Knights all attacking, you can activate, and then you can activate Samut to untap one of those Templar Knights so you can activate again, but that's pretty niche. Moving on, I got 3 different Bant commanders I wanted to mention. Chulane. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card, you put a land from your hand into play. That seems fantastic. You have all of these 2-mana creatures filling out your deck. That's 2 mana, draw a card. Over and over and over again, and potentially ramping. And you can bounce the Templar Knight to your hand after activating if it gets blocked or something, and save it from getting killed, and then replay it and trigger Chulane again. Awesome. There's Derevi, being able to tap or untap target permanent when it enters the battlefield or when a creature you control deals damage to a player. So if you swing with 5 Templar Knights, activate, and those 5 get in and deal damage, and you can untap those 5 Templar Knights, and then before combat ends, you can activate again. It's almost like an additional combat step with the Templar Knights triggers. It's great. And lastly, Galadriel, Light of Valnor. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, choose one that has been chosen this turn. You can add 3 green, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, or scry 2 and draw a card. So it can help refill your hand, it can help buff all your creatures, or it can give you mana if you want to cast some more things. Seems pretty good. I feel like the +1/+1 counters and the scry 2 draw a card are going to be the most used, but it gives the Templar Knight decks a lot of reach in the late game. There's only one Jeskai commander I wanted to mention, and that is Eowyn Shield Maiden. 5 mana, 5/4 first strike. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if another human entered the battlefield under your control, which Templar Knights are, you create 2 knights. And then if you control 6 or more humans, you draw a card. Seems great. It's just card draw and token creation. Rounding off the commanders, I have 2 Mardu options. The first one is Ishin, 2 Heavens as 1. It doesn't directly work with the Templar Knights, however, you're attacking a lot with Templar Knights. Ishin cares about attack triggers, so you're going to have a lot of things in your deck that work well when creatures you control attack. And then, back onto the human stuff, Jarina Kudro. Other humans you control get +2/+0, and whenever it enters the battlefield, create a human creature token for each time you cast a commander from the command zone this game. So making all of your Templar Knights 5/1 seems pretty decent. The next most important category to talk about when building a Templar Knights deck is the legendary artifacts. That's like the whole thing with the Templar Knights, is you get to get legendary artifacts from your deck and put them into play. So let's talk about a few of those. The first card though I want to mention really quickly before we talk about anything else with Templar Knights is Thrumming Stone. Thrumming Stone is a super important card in this deck. It is phenomenal. It's a legendary artifact that can just dump Templar Knights from your deck into play. So you can fetch it with your Templar Knights and it just dumps them all into play. Love it, auto include. We're going to be going in groups of colors because we don't know exactly what commander we're going to be using for this deck, so I might as well talk about them by color. The colorless ones that can go into any deck include Agatha's Soul Cauldron. This can be very good. It's only 2 mana, which is kind of meh. You're getting a 2 mana card for all this work. However, it can do a lot in this deck. It can pump up your Templar Knights at instant speed while also giving them special abilities. It can be very, very strong and combo-y. Akroma's Memorial, obvious include here. Andoril, Narsil Reforged. It can make your creatures really big. Kimmel, the Inner Sun. Just a good way to stop all the control decks and also get some extra value at your end step. Chromatic Orrery, a lot of ramp and card draw. God Pharaoh's Statue. Just slow down your opponents and slowly drain them out. Graz, Unstoppable Juggernaut. This one I love. Being able to attack with your Templar Knights and then after blockers, instant speed, getting Graz out and turning all of your Templar Knights into 5/3s. Your opponents will have no idea that's coming. It's so cool. Also really hoses the Arcades deck if you happen to be against one of those. Helm of the Host, depending on the commander you choose and such, this could be a very, very good card. Cauldron Complete, just get a big body. Karn Legacy Reforged. If you're in a very artifact-heavy deck, this card seems like a lot of fun. Sky Sovereign Console Flagship, in a pinch, it is removal. The Immortal Sun, it just kind of does everything. Mightstone and Weakstone, it's either removal or card draw and future ramp. The One Ring, you don't get that ETB trigger, but you do get to start drawing a ton of cards. Ugin's Nexus, if you have a way to kind of manipulate this and sacrifice it and such, you can take some extra turns. And then we're going to talk about the white legendary artifacts, because these are essentially colorless. Whatever deck you pick, it's going to have white in it because it has to. So these just seem like great includes to just toss in. Avacyn's Memorial. Legendary permanents you control have indestructible. Give your commander indestructible and whatever legendary artifacts you go get. Spear of Heliod. Give your Templar Knights a bit of a buff, while also deterring your opponents from attacking you. In Thousand Moon Smithy. Again, if you're heavier in the artifacts, this seems fantastic. There's a couple of cool legendary artifacts that are blue that I wanted to mention. Those include Bident Thassa. Flash this thing in and just draw a ton of cards if the opponent's not blocking a lot. Along with Memnarch, just start stealing all your opponent's stuff. Like that. I like that a lot. I have 4 black legendary artifacts to mention that seem really fun for this deck. And Rakier. Whenever it attacks, you may cast an artifact spell from your hand or graveyard by paying life rather than its mana value. You're gonna have a lot of big legendary artifacts in this deck. If they get blown up or if one gets stuck in your hand, this thing can get them out of there. Blitzwing. This seems awesome in the deck. You can kind of sneak in Wound Reflection. I love that. Very cool. Bolus's Citadel. Disgusting combo-y card that's really, really good. And you can pay 2 life to just cast Templar Knights off the top of your library. Love it. Love it. And Elbrus the Binding Blade. Really cheap to equip, really expensive to cast, but if you can get it in for 1 mana and flip it, you got a 13/13 flying Intimidate Trampler that just keeps getting bigger. I got 3 red legendary artifacts to mention. Brass's Tunnel Grinder. When it ETBs, you get to discard any number of cards from your hand and draw that many cards. So if you need to change out what you got going on in hand, you can go snag this and kind of small wheel. And eventually it might be able to flip into a land that lets you discover, which is pretty cool. Embercleave. It's very nice that when this thing enters, it can attach to a creature right away. So instant speed, you can give one of your Templar Knights +1/+1 and double strike. And the RMS Titanic. This can just create a lot of treasures for you, which is pretty nice if you need ramp. I've got only 1 green legendary artifact that's worth mentioning, and that's the Great Henge. Makes your things bigger, draws you cards, ramps, gains you life. This card does everything, and it's really, really good when your deck's full of small, cheap creatures. I've got 6 multicolored legendary artifacts to mention, one of which actually I just now realized can't fit into a single one of the commanders that I mentioned previously, but we'll get to that in a second. Drakniren. It can just ETB, exile up to 1 target creature, and then it can buff up one of your Templar Knights as an equipment. So it's a legendary artifact that you can fetch that's just removal for any creature. Brutaclad, if you have a lot of token stuff inside the deck, Brutaclad seems like it could be a lot of fun. Send Triplets. Nobody would expect you to just go and fetch out a Send Triplets, and it is a fun card to play, a really not fun card to play against. Sharoom. And Sharoom also would work as the commander for one of these decks. However, I think it's better in the deck if you're in Esper colors, because you can fetch it out to return target artifact card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So any big legendary artifact that gets blown up, you can just get it back by going and getting Shroom. Ultra Magnus Tactician. This requires you to be in an interesting build because it only really works with artifact creatures. So you have to have a lot of legendary artifact creatures in your deck that those are your targets to fetch up. And if you do, it's a good way to get them out of your hand. If you wanted to make a Transformers Templar Knights deck where it's a bunch of Transformers to fetch and Templar Knights to go get them, this would be an auto include in that. And the last card I wanted to mention, which actually doesn't work with any of the commanders that I had previously mentioned, is Legacy Weapon, because there wasn't a 5-color commander that really was super on theme that I wanted to mention. This just doesn't work inside any of those other decks. But if you go Morophon, Legacy Weapon seems like a great include. There's a bunch of really cool synergistic cards that work well because you have so many cards that are going to have the same name. And some of those cards are Remembrance. Whenever a non-token creature you control is put into your graveyard, you may search your library for a copy of it and put it into your hand. Echoing Truth. Return target non-land permanent and all other permanents of the same name as that permanent to their owner's hands. So this works really well to protect all your Templar Knights against a board wipe and just bounce on the hand. They're cheap to recast anyways. But it can also double as removal by bouncing something that your opponents control. Pirated Copy. Make it so all of your Templar Knights draw you a card when they deal damage, while also being a Templar Knight. Great. Desperate Research. You pay 2 mana to reveal the top 7 cards of your library and get all the Templar Knights from that 7 cards to hand. Great. Echoing Return. Just get all of your Templar Knights from your graveyard back to hand. Infernal Tutor. Just a way that you can go get an extra Templar Knight to hand. Secret Salvage. This one is really interesting. Exile target non-land card from your graveyard. Search your library for any number of cards with the same name as that card, reveal them and put them into your hand, and then shuffle your library. So if a Templar Knight dies, you can cast this, exile it from the graveyard, and then go and get a bunch of Templar Knights from your deck. Echoing Courage. Just make it so all of your Templar Knights get +2/+2 until end of turn. It's a really, really good combat trick in this deck. Pack Hunt. Search your library for up to 3 copies of target creature. Put them into your hand. So it's 4 mana to just go and get 3 Templar Knights. Curse Scroll can just be repeatable removal. Locket of Yesterdays is 1 mana. All your Templar Knights cost 1 mana. Love it. Mirror Box can make your Templar Knights huge. Blood Bond March. Whenever a creature spell is played, each player returns all creatures with the same name as that spell from his or her graveyard to play. You play this, you play a Templar Knight, and all your dead Templar Knights are now alive. Wood Sage, 2 mana, creature. Tap it, name a creature card, reveal the top 4 cards of your library, and put all Templar Knights from among them into your hand. Perfect. There's also like the other way you can do this, where you can deck thin and remove a lot of Templar Knights from your deck, so that way your deck is just like a combo. This is just a really different build, and it's just kind of like building it as a combo deck, and the Templar Knights is just there for, ha ha ha, we're gonna make this deck half the size. Like Extirpate. Choose target card in a graveyard other than a basic land. Search its owner's graveyard, hand, or library for all cards with the same name and exile them. There's a lot of cards with a similar effect, and I'm just gonna mention them. Eradicate, Cranial Extraction, Lost Legacy, Memoricide, Necromentia, but Necromentia can actually make you a ton of zombies and is a really, really cool one. Like, I would probably include this in a normal build. Surgical Extraction, The End, which also doubles as removal if you really need it to be, and Lobotomy. Next, I want to mention some other ways to untap your Templar Knights, because as I mentioned with Aurelia earlier in this video, when you attack with your Templar Knights and you tap them to activate, if you can untap them, you can activate again, and do that again and again if you can untap more than once. So, let's talk about some good ways to untap your stuff. There's Call to Glory, Rally of Wings, Roar of Ka, which can also buff up your creatures if you need to. We have a new one from Outlaws of Thunder Junction with Rustler's Rampage, which can also give double strike if you wanted to. 2 Arms, which draws you a card. Village Bellringer, which untaps everything on a creature, which is kind of nice. There's Dramatic Reversal. You can toss in Isochron Scepter and go infinite mana with this as well. And if you do that, you'll be able to go and get every single legendary artifact out of your deck and put it into play. That's a really cool combo. If you're in blue, you might as well. Turnabout, which has some extra utility if you need it to. Benefactor's Draught, another way to draw a card when you untap all your creatures, but also you could draw some additional cards by your opponent's blocking. Curse of Bounty, easy, just repeatable as well. Vitalize, it's only 1 mana, so it's the cheapest one on this list. Energy Flux, it can also protect your creatures by preventing all damage that would be dealt to them, however they won't be dealing any damage anymore. And Flying Crane Technique, which could also just be used to kind of end the game. You're giving all of them flying and double strike along with the untap. So you'll be able to go and get 2 legendary artifacts in total, while also having 5 3/1 flying double strikers. So depending on what you get with the Templar Knight's triggers, you could probably just end the game right there. Now let's talk about the cards that are more similar to Aurelia, as they give you an extra combat and untap all your creatures. Aggravated Assault, which is repeatable, nice. Combat Celebrant also works with any human synergies. Fury of the Horde, you can cast this one for free. Great Train Heist, has a lot of extra utility on there. Karlach, Morog, Relentless Assault, Savage Beating, and Waves of Aggression. Your deck's going to have about 30 Templar Knights in it. That's a lot of Knights, and it's a lot of humans. As I mentioned when talking about commanders, there's a lot of cards that have synergies with Knights and humans. I'm going to talk about a few other cards that have good Knight and human synergies. However, they wouldn't be in the command zone, they'd be in the 99. Kinsbale Cavalier to give double strike. Knight Exemplar, +1/+1 and indestructible. Worthy Knight just creates a bunch of tokens. Herald of Hoofbeats to give horsemanship. Kindred Discovery to draw you a ton of cards. Sanguinary Cavalry, really interesting card here, can put in a lot of work. Hack On, so that way you can cast your Templar Knights from your graveyard. Locthwain Lancer gives you card advantage if somebody kills your Templar Knights. Smitten Swordmaster could actually just win the game with its sorcery side, plus it's just a 2/1 for 2. Corvath Brightflame, give your Knights flying and haste. Also, this could be your commander if you wanted to and go along with Sylvia, but Sylvia doesn't really do anything for you. However, Corvath is pretty good. Heron Blade Elite can tap for a ton of mana after you play a bunch of humans. Horn of Gondor can create a ton of tokens. Marshal of Zalfir, just a 2-mana lord. Vodalian Wave Knight, whenever you draw a card, you can put a +1/+1 counter on each other knight you control. Love that. Knight's Charge to drain out your opponent slowly, and then also if your creatures keep dying, you can sacrifice it to bring your whole graveyard back into play. Wintermoor Commander is going to have a lot of toughness, and it can give your Templar Knights indestructible. And Oath of Earl, you create 2 1/1s, then you create 2 2/2s, and then you put an indestructible counter on up to 1 target human, and you become the Monarch. This seems fun. You'll be casting a ton of creature spells in this deck, so you might as well run a bunch of cards that do something when you cast creature spells or have creatures enter the battlefield, especially because you have 32 mana creatures in your deck. Cathar's Crusade, make your board huge. Got Eternal Oketra, to make 4/4 zombies every time you play a Templar Knight. This could also work as your commander if you wanted to. Sarah Paragon for some recursion along with Sun Titan. Tashia's Welcome for card draw. Ogre Battle Driver, giving your Templar Knights haste and +2/+0 seems pretty good. Beast Whisperer to refill your hand as you cast your Knights. Same thing with Elemental Bond. Rhythm of the Wild can make your Templar Knights bigger or give them haste, and also make them uncounterable. Seems great. Aura Shards for some repeatable removal. Gilwain seems pretty interesting, being able to kind of grow your Templar Knights whenever you play them with a little aura. I like it, seems fun. And Alonus to get some clues. You're going to want a lot of Templar Knights in play, and there are some additional ways to get Templar Knights outside of just actually playing more Templar Knights. You've got a lot of spells that can copy your creatures when they enter the battlefield or when they attack or something similar to that. So some additional ways to make token copies of your Templar Knights are Reflection to Letjara, awesome card. Rudder Replication, this just can make 5 Templar Knights, that's a free activation. Flame Shadow Conjuring's cool. Kindred Charge, just double your board. Mana Echoes works really well. Ortheon, if you're able to get to that second ability, can be disgusting. Again, it's just a free activation. Springheart Nantuko, new card, works really well. You just bestow it and then you're able to copy your Templar Knights whenever you play a Templar Knight. And Cabaret Confluence can just end up making you 3 Templar Knights if that's what you need to be able to activate. And lastly, I want to mention a few one-off cards. These didn't fit into any of the other categories I mentioned, however, they're definitely worth mentioning. And those are Tybalt's Trickery. You can do some weird shenanigans with Tybalt's Trickery in this deck and have your deck be like all 2-drops or something. and a lot of them being Templar Knights, counter one of your own Templar Knights, and then flip into the one thing that's not a 2-drop and go crazy. That could be a lot of fun. Lurking Predators, you're going to have a ton of creatures in this deck, so you can use Lurking Predators to kind of get some free Templar Knights. And Fronlin Felidar. Templar Knights have Vigilance, so this just gives them an extra ability of being able to pay 1 tap to tap a creature. That's everything I have for the Templar Knights. I hope that I was able to help you get a direction on what you want to do with your deck. Let me know if there's anything that you're doing that I didn't mention, because some people in the comments section might be able to use that information. I'll see you next time. Peace out, everybody.